Okay, I'm going to call this meeting of the Audit Committee to order. This is the third meeting for us in 2021. I'm chairing just physically here in the chambers, as our usual chair is working remotely right now. So we have a number of items on the public agenda. My intention is to go through them just one by one. Colleagues, let me know if you want anything else done, and then we'll be moving into closed session. As you see, we have a reason listed on the public agenda to deal with that. Then we'll come back into public session once we're finished with the closed session. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Just raise your hand if you're on the Zoom so I know. One of our members, Ms. Higgs, is going to be joining probably around 1 o'clock. She is a bit delayed. And thank you. The clerk has also mentioned, I should be mentioning, that the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing, or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. You can also call 311 if you're in the City of London and just enter that extension. Okay, moving on to item 4.1. This is the financial statements, the audit of the financial statements for the Hamilton Road BIA. The report explains why they were a bit delayed and are coming to us separately from the consolidated financial statements we received before. I did see Mr. Brustad was on the Zoom. So I imagine if you have any questions about the audit of the financial statements, either city staff or the auditors or Mr. Brustad would be able to answer them. So first, I'll just see if there's a mover for the recommendation. Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Van Holst. Discussion about the audited financial statements for the Hamilton Road BIA. Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Perhaps I could ask the auditors to just provide a little more detail on the amount due from Hyde Park BIA. It's in note 4, but I understand that's the nature that's money that's not actually owing, but has to do with a program that's being delivered. And I wonder if some clarification could be provided on that.
Sure, let's go to Ms. Denbach. Yes, I see that she's maybe not in the Zoom, so why don't we wait for her to rejoin in the meantime? Perhaps we can go to city finance staff to see if you'd like to answer the question.
Through the chair, it's Ms. Bourbon. I'm looking, I don't have that level of detail as to what that is. Normally, those kind of things are typical for our process. Our auditors may, once Ms. Denbach returns, may have that information. That is very, very typical, where money flows back and forth between our boards and commissions, and having due to and from on the consolidated statements are eliminated between the entities just because they're interrelated transactions. So Ms. Denbach, I believe, is back and perhaps may have the information that details exactly what those are.
I'm going to go to Ms. Denbach. I'm just going to say Councillor Van Holst asked about note 4 in the audited financial statements about related party transactions and wanted to understand more what that note is intended to indicate.
Hi, everyone. My apologies. My audio was not working, so I had to log back in. So thank you for repeating the question. I didn't hear Ms. Barbon's response to the question, but I will say in the standalone financial statements for Hamilton Road BIA, any transactions with related parties are required to be disclosed. And so that's what this note is meant to show. Any amounts that are owing due to or due from the City of London and or another BIA. Thank you.
Councillor Van Holst.
Okay, thank you. In discussion with the board and our treasurer, it was described that this wasn't money that's actually owing, because somebody asked when are they going to pay us, but actually had to do, I think, with the Digital Main Street program and how that was being administered. So that was the clarification I was looking for.
I can comment further on that if you like.
Go ahead.
So the amount due from Hyde Park BIA, that's correct, is related to the Digital Main Street grant that Hyde Park BIA is administering on behalf of all of the BIAs. And so it represents a pool of funds or an asset that Hamilton Road BIA is entitled to. So it won't flow to Hamilton Road in the form of cash, I don't believe, but rather expenditures being paid by Hyde Park BIA on behalf of Hamilton Road BIA, if that helps clarify.
Thank you. Any further questions about the financial statements? Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Perhaps through you to staff, I'm curious. I learn a little bit every year, a bit more about our relationships with the BIAs and the flow throughs and how they all work. Recognizing that the statement of cash flows identifies some concerns with the operation of the Hamilton Road BIA. That of course there was a surplus deficit identified for 2020, and if that surplus deficit were matched in 2021, that would eliminate any cash on hand. What are the liabilities to the city? What are the liabilities associated with the BIA for themselves as well? How does that relationship work, and how is that monitored, and what's our responsibilities with respect to those circumstances as they proceed?
There are quite a few questions in there. I'm going to go to the auditor first to see which of them you'd like to answer, and then perhaps we'll go to city staff for some of the answer. Go ahead.
So I believe the majority of the questions will be best answered by city staff, just in terms of city's responsibility for managing the deficits amongst the BIA, or any responsibility that the city may have, unless there's a specific question within there that you felt I was best to answer.
No, I think that's a good idea. Let's go to Ms. Barbone.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. So I think in a nutshell, just to give you a sense from a financial perspective, so the City of London Municipal Council, as through the BIA bylaws that come through, approve the budgets for the upcoming years. Typically in December, we've moved that and worked with all of our BIAs to have those approved before the end of the year. So through that budget, it was identified and was approved by council when that was brought forward, that there was going to be, because of COVID specifically, a draw and a shortfall for some of the costs that they might incur during the current year. And it was planned through the budget that they would have a draw from their operating reserve fund. So some of that difference that you see with the deficit is obviously a difference between the budgets and the form that they're presented versus the PSAB accounting standards showing as a deficit. So this is actually, the draw at the end of the day was actually less than they had anticipated. So there is not a shortfall that wasn't ultimately planned for and projected as part of their budget. So when we see the city budgets that will come, or the budgets presented to Municipal Council from the BIAs, you will see those coming forward later on this year for the 2022 year. And you'll be able to see how that budget, because they do on a cash flow basis ensure that they aren't spending cash that they haven't obviously planned for. So if there were concerns from their budget, that would be the time through those budget approvals that City Council would identify those problems. Certainly they, one of the requirements would be to ensure that they have a balanced budget. And if there was a shortfall, would then need to plan for that accordingly in the following year. So this one was planned for. From a liability perspective, obviously, they would then recoup that through the additional, potentially an additional increase in their budget that they might require from their members if there was a problem and a concern going forward.
That's for you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Ms. Barbone. That's helpful. I think that's what I'm looking for here is these statements are the actuals and the budget is the budget, the kind of the prospective and what may happen, and reconciling between the two of these to make sure that the budget and the actuals ended up aligning themselves, and that this wasn't something that was a surprise to us. Yeah, further, the question was what our responsibility in this is. I have full faith in the auditors that as presented, that they're accurate. It's just a question of if there's any obligations on us in terms of monitoring these through the statements as they're presented to us. So I think that's quite helpful. Thank you, Ms. Barbone.
Okay, I see Councillor Van Holst.
Yes, thank you. So our ability to cover the deficit partly came from having some finances remaining on hand from a previous year, that there were some projects that we had the money for, but weren't able to complete. And so that assisted us. However, I see there's a concern here with the Hamilton Road BIA, and it's like similar to Old East Village BIA. It's a small, it's a small one. We don't have the big box stores like you would see in a couple of other BIAs where they can draw a lot of funds through it. I don't know that we could take much more from our members. And I think what I'll be looking for come budget time is something along the lines
of Councillor Van Holst, I'm just going to intervene because this is the audit committee. And I entertained the questions from Councillor Turner, which were they were verging in corporate services territory about the operating budget monitoring, which are perfectly fine questions, but we're really talking about the financial statements for the BIA. I feel kind of bad for the BIA. You know, if we did this to every organization during the consolidated financial statements, we'd have a 10-hour audit committee meeting where we scrutinize every little bit in all the different parts of the consolidated financial statements. This is really a discussion about the financial statements only. And so I know we have to answer some of these questions because they're related to the financial statements, but I don't want to have a little mini budget discussion at the audit committee, and we can just have that discussion at the budget meetings.
Okay, well, that's fine, Mr. Chair. I was just going to ask what that discussion is going to come up, how we prepare for something like that. So I guess we could ask that offline, but I see that our administration and business development are still going to be crucial. However, our levy from the city won't match that, and like the BA, I think we'll need to shore them up a bit. So that will be coming forward. I was just going to ask a little bit about how we should go about that, but again, we can discuss that offline if that's your preference. Thank you.
Just not at audit committee. Yep. Any other audit related questions? Okay, so we've had it moved and seconded. All those in favor of receiving the financial statements for the the Hamilton Road BIA? Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much. I think we've seen an example of why it's important to, as much as we can, keep them on time so that they're all dealt with at once in the consolidated financial statements. I appreciate that there was a bit of a delay, but sometimes it comes around to bite you. A lot of scrutiny. Okay. 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, all internal audit related. So I wonder if we could deal with them all together and just ask questions of Mr. Price across all three reports. I think that's a fair way to handle it. Maybe I'll just open it up to hear a brief intro from Mr. Price, and then we'll get into questions from committee members about the internal audit reports. Mr. Price.
Hi there. Thanks. Thank you. I'll start on slide 17 with the report on the findings and the tracking of the findings. This is where we spent most of our effort over the summer, was really working with the teams to understand the status of the current findings, and we're able to complete 2 of the reviews with management. They put a lot of effort in there, and the So you'll note that the parking revenue generation assessment, that one is now closed. The findings are closed to our satisfaction, and they're working to put some additional automation in there to make it more efficient. And then the construction procurement process assessment, the findings have been addressed as well. And of note as well is that the timing, I think in past meetings, we've seen some of the timing slide. In this case, the timing has actually been accelerated in some of the cases for some of the other reviews as we updated those. So positive from that perspective. And then the next slide is the number 18 is the dashboard. And what you'll note here is there are a few projects that are delayed over the summer. What we've noted is that probably both in the city as well as Deloitte, from a resourcing perspective, it's been challenging to get those projects going. I think we'll still be quite a bit in track, and we did have a plan that was back end loaded in the sense that it was more in the second, third, fourth quarter rather than before the June meeting. And we expect that we'll get back on track with all of those, given that the SaaS application review is with management now for response. And the other projects, we're all working to kick those off in the next few weeks and to complete them in the next couple months. So then the next meeting, we should have more to report from those projects. So that's really the high level there. And the last document is really just a written summary of what I just described. So nothing additional to report there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Price. Let's go to questions, discussion about the information from the internal auditor. Just raise your hand on the Zoom if you want to weigh in. Okay. Thanks very much. I'm certainly happy to see some of those observations closed out. I think it makes sense that there's a little bit of a scheduling delay as people are taking what I would consider to be very well-deserved vacations. We've been going through a very difficult time, and people need to take time off, get some rest, and if it's going to lead to some delays, I think that's manageable in the overall envelope of the work, and we can catch up later on. So I appreciate you being candid about that and just explaining what's going on that front, and I think it's very reasonable. I'm glad to see the parking revenue piece is closed out. I know that was a very useful internal audit, and I think it's good that we're closing out those observations. So maybe I can have a motion to just receive these reports from the internal auditor. Thank you, Councillor Turner, seconded by Deputy Mayor Morgan. One last call for any discussion. Okay, all those in favor? Okay, that carries. Thanks very much, Mr. Price. At this point, we're going to go into closed session. The reason is listed on the public agenda. It's item 6.1. You see it's a confidential trade secret or scientific, technical, commercial, financial, or labor relations information supplied to the city. Personal matters about an identifiable individual. The full reason is written out on the agenda, which I will not read. Have a motion to go into closed session. Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Van Holst. All those in favor? Okay, that's carried. Give us a moment. We're going to turn off the live streaming and move into closed session. And once we're finished in closed session, we'll come back out into public session. Okay.